We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.
So welcome back to Planet Holyrood. I'm Paul Hutcheon, political editor of the Daily Record. I'm joined this week by two podcast legends. We've got Mark Smith, who's the head of news for the Daily Record. Of course, Ben Borland, the editor of the Scottish Daily Express, and most unlikely Lib Dem voter in Scotland. That never gets old, that one, does it? So we're going to talk a lot about income tax and the potential for it rising in the budget. But I think, first of all, we have to address this madness that's coming from Westminster in relation to the Health Secretary West Streeting and unnamed Downing Street aides. What seems to have happened is that overnight, anonymous figures in Number 10 have been briefing against Streeting to the effect that he's on manoeuvres, that he wants Starmer's job, that he's going to challenge him for the leadership. Streeting, who was doing the morning round of broadcasting, pushed back strongly, basically accusing Downing Street of kneecapping him and saying that there needs to be a culture change within Downing Street, which is being interpreted as a dig at the Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney. It seems like there's a meltdown.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. It's all come out of nowhere, really, blown up overnight. The plot has already got a nickname, the karaoke coup, because apparently the plotters all meet in a karaoke bar down in Westminster. You've no doubt been in there, Paul.
Many times, twice a week.
And yeah, I mean, Streeting's performance on Breakfast TV was great. He did the whole spiel about how he wasn't involved in Shergar or JFK, or he really does perform well in front of the camera. And if it's been an attempt by Downing Street to shut him down, then it's backfired pretty badly.
Smitty, I spoke to MPs this morning, and the general consensus is that Downing Street have messed up badly here. They've basically undermined one of their best media performers, and they've just generated needless split stories, and it's just a disaster.
I don't know. Like, if it was a karaoke coup, then his song would be killed at the county, wouldn't it? Because Streeting talks a good game. Like many people who are thought of as leadership candidates for whatever party, sometimes it's hard to put your finger on exactly what their achievements have been. And that would certainly apply to West Streeting. To me, the idea of him as Labour Prime Minister or Labour leader is laughable. And I think he's actually mishandled this whole thing. He's come out strongly this morning. We were talking about kneecapping like he's some sort of terrorist victim. What's he playing at? I think he's scrambling
to defend himself, though, didn't he?
Well, but I think what he's doing is trying to rustle up a rebellion against Starmer, but really failing.
His granddad was a member of the Cray gang, apparently. So maybe kneecapping is.
Maybe in his family that's
just normal. A normal way of getting it.
Yeah. Well, they say politics is rock and roll for the ugly, don't they? So maybe it's also criminal activity for the ugly.
Is that Donald Dury said that politics is like Butlins for ugly people or something like that? Something brutal. There seems to be a growing view, though, that Starmer will not lead Labour into the general election. And there are two pressure points in that. One is this budget in November, which looks like it's going to be extremely difficult politically. And of course, the elections next May in Wales and in Scotland. And if you look at Labour's opinion poll rating, and more pertinently, his own personal approval rating, which I think he's got the lowest personal approval rating of any Prime Minister since 1977, the fact that people are openly talking about getting rid of him after about 15 months in charge, it doesn't look good for him.
No, it doesn't. I mean, it was noticeable, obviously, PMQs today. This all came out at the worst possible time, gave Kemi Badenoch a real attack line. And it was notable that Streeting's not there. He's up in Manchester opening a new NHS facility. And of course, it's Manchester where the other leadership rival, Andy Burnham, is, lurking, biding his time. So it did seem almost like, there was an intake of breath when he said, the Health Secretary's not here. Didn't seem like the Labour benches were that raucous in defending the Prime Minister. And, they weren't quiet, but I've certainly heard louder backing at FMQs PMQs, I should say.
Do you think, Smitty, that see if Angela Rayner, she's got the time and space now in the back benches, if she did a series of interviews where she was self-deprecating, admitted that she was at fault over that tax thing, floated a few policy ideas, reinvented herself, when the time comes, she might actually still win a leadership contest.
She seems a more likely Labour leader and a more likely PM to be than Wes Streeting, who I always think looks a bit like Starmer. I think the voters might just get mixed up and just think it's the same guy, I'm not really convinced by Streeting, but I think Rayner could certainly be a more convincing, I think, political figure. She probably would be better placed to take on Farage as well. However, I think it's Burnham for me, who looks like, if only there was a route in for Burnham. That's the problem, being not in Parliament. But he still strikes me as the big hitter who's just biding his time. And it looks to me like Streeting's kind of, just going off a bit early, so to speak.
Obviously, we have to ask the question, what does this all mean for Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar, whose party is 17 points behind the SNP in the polls? What does he think about this needless and stupid row? There was a Scottish Labour source quoted in various papers today saying, "This is an entirely self-inflicted wound and there's no need for it. It is massively unhelpful and ill-disciplined briefing. It could come from the PM's own mouth and still be that." Don't get the impression Anas is too happy with what's going on down south again.
He just keeps, every time Anas looks like he's making inroads and striking a chord with voters, he just gets a big wet fish in the face from his so-called comrades down south. I really wish the Labour strategists in London, wherever they hang out, would start to look at the Scottish election as an actual strategic element of their planning, because it looks to me like they've forgotten it's about to happen.
Well, then Morgan McSweeney, who, seems to be pulling the strings in all this, lives in Scotland. His wife's at Hamilton, Clyde Valley MP, or somewhere up that way. Does they live in South Lanarkshire? You'd think he'd be plugged into all this.
He's maybe not noticed. He's not the brightest. Does he know he's in Scotland? Does he think he's in Wales?
Maybe he doesn't spend an awful lot of time up here.
Yeah, certainly seems like it.
So let's move to what seems like a happier subject for Labour, the prospect of the first income tax rise, basic rate income rise, since the 1970s. I don't know what you think, but Labour have got themselves into a big mess. There's a huge black hole that they need to fill. It looks like they're going for income tax, maybe a 2p rise to the basic rate, which to me is just madness. Perhaps offset by a national insurance cut. One of the theories is that they think that voters are going to thank them for their honesty by levelling with them and saying, look, we're in a hole, and we need to be honest with you, and this is how we're going to do it. But I don't know what you think, Smitty. I just reckon that voters will look at this idea of taking more money from their wages and they'll say, well, look, the government got us into this situation and now they're making us pay for it.
Yeah, I think there might have been better ways, although plugging a hole of that size, the billions and billions of pounds that the Tories left them needing to find, there are better ways to raise that money, I think, by, properly getting money out of the big energy giants, properly extracting taxes from the big tech companies. I think that would have been a preferable way to go about trying to balance the books. However, there is, I think, some consensus among people who know about these things that tax rise might actually be good for the economy, might fuel a bit of growth if the government can use that money to invest in infrastructure and all that. So,
any confidence in that? Government tend to be good at spending cash.
Well, I mean,
not good at spending it.
I like government spending and I like tax, and I think good old-fashioned Keynesianism got us out of the 1930s depression, sorted us out after the Second World War, and could sort us out again. Britain and the Western nations are stubbornly low growth. maybe we need more government investment, maybe we need more infrastructure. If that doesn't make me sound like a bit of an old, a Bennite, but I think raising money and spending it wisely could actually promote economic growth. And it's not just me saying that. Tom Hunter, that well-known Marxist, billionaire businessman, said as much in your piece today this week, Paul.
He said, "Well, your 2p rise, maybe if it's temporary." But yeah, I thought I'd take your point. It was quite surprising that he said that.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people think actually we might need government intervention here to get the economy moving again, and I think that's what Reeves has got in mind. But will the voters forgive her? No, in other words, they'll give her an absolute shoe in for it.
Although I think I'm right in saying the 2p rise wouldn't affect us in Scotland.
No, we'll come to that in a second, but I just think the optics of such a totemic manifesto commitment, we will not raise the rates of income tax, NI. I mean, they kind of did that in the first budget with the employers' contributions, but this one is just a slam dunk manifesto breach. It has taken more money out of people's pockets at a time when they want to be better off.
I mean, in Scotland, obviously, income tax is partially quite heavily devolved, and we've seen the SNP increase the higher rates of income tax, which is not popular with me, it's not popular with Reed, it's not popular with Tom Hunter, who would rather see an across-the-board rise rather than taxing the wealth creators more heavily. But at least then you're not taxing the lower earners, which a 2p rise, that's just going to increase it for everyone. And obviously
pensioners as well,
pensioners, yeah, it drags the pensioners into paying tax.
Who are still feeling sore, despite the fact that they U-turned on the winter fuel allowance cut, they're still feeling pissed off about that.
And the thing is, in Scotland, again, I'm not in favour of this. I think tax should be reserved to Westminster and set at a UK level. But at least the SNP can say, well, our taxes are higher for the majority of people, as we now know. It was shown this week that the majority of people in Scotland pay more income tax and have done for the past 2 years than they would if they lived in the UK. But at least the SNP government can say free prescriptions, free tuition. There's things, exactly. There's concrete things they can say, this is what you're paying for. What can Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer point to and say?
So I make a distinction between popular socialism and bad socialism. Popular socialism is raising taxes, usually on a progressive basis, and ensuring that the taxpayer and the voter get some benefit from that in terms of new government programs or better public services. Bad socialism is just hiking up taxes in order to fill a black hole in order to meet fiscally conservative rules that you're choosing to follow. And so you're asking people to pay more, and it's not clear that they're going to get anything from that.
That's where the Labour's messaging is terrible. There is no discernible benefit to people in their everyday lives to this tax rise. They might get that right. They might say, give us a penny for the NHS. They might say something like that. And that would be something that's at least concrete that people can see. But yeah, just bringing it into about
2p to fill a £22 billion black hole.
It's like, it's a bit meaningless.
Because the government, Reeves will blame Trump for tariffs and all the rest of it, but I think that UK voters will blame the UK government of the day for the black hole. And, if they're not getting anything at all in return, I think it's serious.
Well, it's like the 2-child cap's going to go.
Well, again, as much as I hate the 2-child cap and I want it gone tomorrow, the optics of increasing taxes on your wages while increasing benefits is tricky. I think they should have got rid of the 2-child cap last year. You can see how the Tories will play that juxtaposition. They're taxing working people more while they're giving people who don't work extra cash. Of course, I think the majority of folk affected by the 2-child cap are actually in work, so I don't accept that Tory narrative for a second. But again, I just don't think the politics are smart and shrewd.
No. It certainly looks like that's the right thing to do for a whole host of reasons. It was a nasty Tory policy in the first place. But you know what? I don't think people are clamouring at the gates to get rid of it. No. And so I don't think that's going to in any way make up for the tax rise in terms of the the voters and their anger at the tax rise.
Well, you can say it was a nasty part. I think polls have shown most people back it, including in
That's
Scotland.
quite nasty, though. That's
Well,
right.
no, most people are realistic with how we should be spending money.
Just because something's popular doesn't mean to say it's right, and we elect politicians to do what they think is right. All of this comes back to the central point. We made it repeatedly. She's sticking to these fiscal rules, which is basically limiting borrowing. She doesn't want to borrow more, and that means she's going to have to come back all the time for tax rises or spending cuts. Yeah. And until she ditches the fiscal rules or tweaks them, she's not going to get herself out of this hole.
But most people agree that all these borrowing rules are kind of, it's kind of playground economics. Borrowing's great. Government should borrow more. Borrow, and borrow again until you're blue in the face, because it's politically great, because everyone's dead by the time you have to pay back. And it just makes sense economically, because you can just get the economy going by borrowing some of that money. I mean, where did the money come from for quantitative easing?
Well, we're £1 trillion in debt. Another few billion's not going to...
We were able to borrow an absolute fortune in order to bail out the banks after 2007, and we're all paying for that. Just borrow, But I don't think they would lose a load of votes by breaking those fiscal rules and borrowing lots of money, but they will lose an awful lot of votes by raising income tax. And I don't know if there's people in Labour with the right ideas about borrowing and about tax. Are they lacking a bit of ballast when it comes to that sort of thinking?
They look a very lightweight. You talk about Streeting, Angela Rayner. They do, I think, they look a very lightweight intellectually. I know I want to talk, but Gordon Brown was on breakfast TV this week. Someone with that kind of stature.
Yeah.
No matter what you think of what New Labour did, they did have some big figures.
Yeah. See, that's where I come back to Burnham. Although he's maybe he's no Clement Attlee, but I think he does have that kind of oomph about him. He strikes me as someone who could have, been on the same level as your Robin Cooks and your John Smith and all that. Somebody who could be charismatic, but also got a bit of ideological heft there as well. You're right. I think there's far too many of them like that.
Yeah, absolutely. But like you say, how did Burnham get?
Aye.
He's trapped in Manchester.
Back in karaoke.
We're just talking about borrowing here. This is from Rachel Reeves' speech, and it just kind of annoys me. She always says, today, 1 in every £10 of taxpayers' money is spent on debt interest. Right. So what? It's just a fact of life.
I didn't see.
We've just gone through COVID. No one's talking about that.
Yeah. Listen, we've had national debt since the Bank of England was set up by a Scotsman, I think in the 1690s or whatever it was. We've had national debt as part of government policy ever since. The idea that it has to be paid off, rubbish. That's not how modern economies work.
And they're never going to pay off.
No, it's
impossible to pay
The
off.
alternative is making ordinary working people pay it off, or it's in the form of higher taxes or spending cuts.
But Thatcher was big on paying debt off because she saw the world through a greengrocer's eyes, and she thought national debt was the same as a debt that you or I have or a small company has, because she was essentially a middle-class grocer's daughter. That's not how national economies are run. And no national economy runs without borrowing, without debt.
And you will pay it off if you get the economy growing. That will pay it off. That will naturally bring it down.
Yeah.
So the question will be, what does a 2p rise as well as a 2p cut in NI do to Scotland's budget? There's a Fraser of Allender paper, I think, or a blog, basically saying that it could result in a £1 billion cut to the Scottish block grant. Obviously, that's tricky for the SNP government a couple of months ahead of the Holyrood election. Now, I listened closely to what the Scottish Government were saying, and they described this £1 billion cut as the worst-case scenario, because this £1 billion cut doesn't factor into the equation any Barnett consequentials that come to Scotland. So I know from speaking to people in the Scottish Government, they think it would be much less than £1 billion. But, say it was £1 billion, they face two choices. Do they match the 2p rise in income tax in Scotland, or do they go for spending cuts? Then I just cannot see John Swinney, even though income tax has been put up already, I cannot see him going into an election having put up income tax.
No, although I think, again, I'm right, if there's a 2p cut to national insurance, that would actually work out as a tax cut for Scots. So
in terms of their pockets, in terms of their own budgets,
John Swinney could cancel that out, and he said, "Look, we've filled out a black hole. You're no better off. You're no worse off." And cancel out any tax cut that Anna Sarwar could use going into next May, saying, "Look, the Labour Chancellor has put more money in your pocket."
I think John Swinney's primary calculation will not be trying to balance books or looking at a bunch of spreadsheets with pounds and pence on it. It will be, how can I play this to screw over Labour and go into this election bizarrely as the tax cutting party, or the party that puts more money in your pockets. Now that will be his primary calculation, and that is what he'll do. I'm absolutely certain. There's no way they'll do anything that's going to damage their chances in April.
They had £1 billion left over at the end of last year.
That as well. I'm sure they've got a kitty of leftover cash somewhere. So you could subtract that from the £1 billion cut too. He's not going to erase tax. He doesn't know how to do that.
No chance.
And also, if he did that, if he did raise income tax and it's offset by the NI, I think it's still the pensioners who would lose out. Does he want to annoy them? It's messy politically. And I think he would. It looks like he's just going to blame Labour for whatever happens. The UK budget this month looks like being a shit show, and there's going to be enough in there for the SNP to moan and squeal about perceived wrongs done to Scotland. I know it's hard to imagine that would be the case, but I mean, we're now 6 months away from the Holyrood election. I mean, it's coming at us fast.
Yeah.
And as I said earlier, opinion polls show the SNP about 17 points ahead, Reform in second place, Labour in third. Do you see it changing at all over the 6 months?
It'll be interesting to see, because there's always events, dear boy, isn't there? Always things that happen that no one really foresaw. We already know about the emergence of Reform and Farage. We already know that Labour's got this terrible, probably, budget coming that's going to do them some damage. We've not really seen the SNP get any sort of bad press over, for example, any upcoming criminal trials involving former chief executives.
That'll be on the risk register. Moral trial in March.
Yeah, I mean that would bring everything back into focus about Sturgeon's disastrous, demise, political demise. And that's still fresh in the memory for a lot of people, but maybe that would remind them of it. So there's events like that might come along and just destabilise the SNP bandwagon, but it's going to have to be something pretty major, because at the moment it looks like the SNP are going to cruise to a fairly steady victory.
I do think, though, that when the election starts, the focus will be on the devolved areas. Every time John Swinney tries to mention Westminster, people are going to be like, well, this is a devolved election. Why are you talking about Keir Starmer? This is about schools, hospitals, the justice system, or chronic low growth. And I think John Swinney is in danger of being seen as someone who desperately wants to change the subject away from the areas that people are actually voting on.
His ideal would be that people forget about Labour at this election and it's just a battle of SNP v Reform. That would be Swinney's dream scenario, you know what I mean? And he probably would quite like it if Reform hoovered up the majority of the unionist votes, thereby destroying his two greatest rivals. So that'll be interesting.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think Reform are the big... Reform could lose a big share of that vote share. They might not. They might hang on and finish in second place. They could equally drop back down into single figures, which would change everything yet again.
And that would put it in... I mean, that'd be very good for Labour.
Well, it would. I mean, I see Nigel Farage has suggested that a pro-independence politician could end up as the Scottish leader, try and take some votes from the SNP.
How does he say these daft?
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't think that's that daft. In a way, Reform, all those soul hires up along the Calder Road in West End for reforms, they're put up by Reform voters. They are wrapping themselves in a patriotic flag. And
I saw you up a lamppost actually a couple of weeks ago. I think it was you and your pals.
Yeah, well, there was probably jambos involved, I would think. But yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, I think the reform isn't the act. A lot of reform voters are not kicking the arse away from being, slightly regressive sort of SNP voters. It's a lot of that sort of nationalist stuff is all tied up in the same sort of worldview, which is, quite exclusive. So yeah, who's to say that reform couldn't suck up patriotic Scottish votes?
So I think that one of the key factors just now is that, you go back to the general election when, compare it to 97, Blair gets in, voters were optimistic, upbeat. They welcomed that new government. But last year, it was based on anger about the Tories. They voted Labour because they wanted to see the back of the Conservative administration. It wasn't out of any enthusiasm for Labour. They felt angry and they expressed that through voting Labour to turf out Sunak. But after 15 months, voters are even angrier than they were in July last year. And that's a really tough political background for an Sarwar.
I think the anger last year for the general election in Scotland was equally directed at the SNP.
Yeah.
Whereas that seems to have dissipated a bit. And
Somebody's taken the sting out of it.
But maybe that will come back. Maybe when people stop and think about how long they have to wait at A&E, about what they think of the local council services being closed, what they think of the local school perhaps being old and, with a leaking roof and all these things that the SNP, the bread and butter issues, if somehow Anna Sauer can restoke the anger there.
Yep, that's his challenge, isn't it? That's his challenge, isn't it? He needs to make this election about service delivery and about how Labour will do it better. If he can do that, then he's in with a shout, But it's difficult to see how you then get a route to victory for Anas. But if he can make the election about service delivery, surely he's got the SNP over a barrel on that.
I think we'd all agree that if this election was about devolved public services and the record of the SNP government, then they would deserve to be turfed out. Mm-hmm. There's no question about that. I mean, it's impossible to make an argument for their re-election based on their running of devolved public services, but the opinion polls don't lie. I mean, the sort of spectre of Westminster is a big factor.
I'll tell you what, we shouldn't forget about for the next Holyrood election. It could be in the run-up to a World Cup.
It could, yes.
Well, it will be in the run. Well, I mean, one that matters because Scotland's in it.
Well, we'll know by next week's.
So by next week's edition, we'll know.
So when is the World Cup? Which month is it?
June. So it's we could qualify next Tuesday, and then you might have a Ali McLeod style rush of Scottish enthusiasm when they run up to the World Cup. You never know.
Who does that benefit, though?
Well, you would think the SNP might benefit from that if there's a great upswell. Hopefully, obviously, Swinney will be glad that the election is before the World Cup, not during that or after that again. But that could be an interesting factor. Yeah, clearly.
And saw that one.
No, I don't think anyone had really. That's the only thing that's on my head today, though.
Could be in the wake of a Hearts League title.
Oh, now you're talking. Now, Swinney is a jambo. Folk forget that.
Have you ever seen him there?
Oh, he's a born and bred Hearts fan, is old Sean. Yeah, he keeps quiet about it. But I'm sure he went to Forest High. A good Hearts goal.
He's very Brisbane.
Aye. I'm sure he's.
So on that note, I think we're going to have to wrap it off.
He's an Aberdeen fan, by the way, Piers, just to be clear.
Hearts rubbish. Thanks again to Ben and to Mark for joining me. Thanks also to Darryl Devine from the Daily Record video team who produced this episode. You can listen to this episode of Planet Holyrood on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or watch it on the Daily Record YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok for the latest news and the best bits of the podcast.
We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.